Make sure you subscribe to the Below the Surface podcast by Eclipsium in partnership with Cyware. We've had the pleasure of speaking with some amazing guests, including Zeno Kova, Richard Hughes, Vincent Zimmer, and more. We discuss topics related to firmware and supply chain security, uncovering those pesky vulnerabilities that lie, well, below the surface in your environments. You can find all the episodes and subscribe by visiting eclipsium.com/podcast or searching for Below the Surface in your favorite podcast catcher.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2024. We are in beautiful sunny San Francisco in Broadcast Alley, which is Moscone West. I am Jeff Mann, co-host of Paul's Security Weekly, and I'm here today to talk to Jay Mar-Tang. He's the field CISO for a company called Pentera. Jay, welcome to RSA.
Jeff, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having us here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for 15 years now.
Okay.
Spent most of it doing a lot of the defensive work, which is typically when you think of cybersecurity, right? You're putting up layer defenses, and that can consist of multiple different techs, which I have had the privilege of working with. So whether it's multi-factor authentication, data loss prevention, SIM, network detection response. And then I spent a little bit of time in the privileged identity space.
Okay.
And then finally had the opportunity to try a different type of security and really put on the hat of the attacker and the lens of the attacker. And I joined Pentera about 3.5 years ago. I've been doing that ever since.
So tell us a little bit about Pentera.
Sure. So Pentera is the global leader in automated security validation. And what we enable our customers to do is to look at their networks through that lens of the attacker and really test themselves on demand, moving away from what was once done manually. And being able to do it continuously, because I'm
a manual pen tester by trade, so be careful what you say.
Hey, it's all good, because you know what? We're not here to replace you. We're here to make your life a little bit easier.
Very good.
And that is all done through the use of automation. So think about, when you're doing things, now having a power tool in your tool belt that you can actually let go and work simultaneously. So we're trying to make you, folks of your nature, more effective, essentially, at your job.
Excellent. Yeah, and tool is an important word there. I'm old school. I started pen testing over 30 years ago.
Sure.
And all we had was manual back then. But automation certainly comes in handy. You mentioned that you try to protect networks. And, of course, networks these days, who knows where they are? But very often they're in the cloud.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing to help organizations that are moving more and more to cloud-based networks and environments?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen an explosion over the last several years. So many organizations now fall into the hybrid type of environment where they have still things traditionally on-prem, but at the same time they're moving and they have cloud workloads and data, and the attackers are hip to that. I mean, now we're seeing a lot of attacks that are still either originate in the cloud or involve cloud data. So what we want to do is that same mindset of thinking like the attacker and looking at your attack surface like the attacker. Now we got to take that attack surface and bring it into the fold. So what we allow to do when we launched Pentera Cloud, the goal was to really take the automation engine and become the first automated pen testing platform in the cloud to do all the types of attacks that attackers are doing, whether it's launching code, moving laterally, but now focus on cloud workloads, cloud data, cloud identities, but still encompass the whole IT environment as well. So, I mean, think about being able to move from your on-prem environment into your cloud back to your on-prem. That is what we're looking to enable our customers to do now with our cloud product.
So from an attacker perspective, are you targeting the cloud from anywhere on the internet? Are you targeting on-prem from the cloud and vice versa? Do you do all of the above?
Yes, all of the above, because we think that there's too many attack vectors. Like there's such a big web of where the attackers can go, where they can originate from. So for us, it's a matter of we look at the attack surface, both internal attack surface, external attack surface, and cloud. So we want to wrap it all together and be able to do that.
Great. And you're a tool. You're supposed to supplement internal pen test teams or even third-party teams.
Yeah, I mean, we traditionally, if you didn't have the privilege or the luxury of having a team to do it in house, you were doing it from the outside.
Right.
And that was just simply not enough, because we get a false, like a snapshot in time, almost a false sense of security, because we might get a once a year pen test or twice a year pen test. But think about how often the environment is changing, right? We're adding in those identities, we're adding in infrastructure, and that could fundamentally change your risk footprint. So we want to be able to do it continuously. And again, for folks like yourselves who might be doing it manually, it's like, great, let's help you scale. Right? Time is of the essence. We really want to minimize the dwell time that attackers have inside the environment, which is the time at which an intrusion begins up until which it's discovered. And by running these attacks continuously, we can hopefully get into the purple teaming mindset, where we're continuously testing, we're continuously assessing, and we have a pulse on our network and say, we're good, we're good, we're ransomware ready, we're ready for this attack. Or, hey, maybe we're not, but at least we've identified the gaps. We can address those gaps, and then we can retest on demand.
Are there certain types of attacks or attack methodologies that sort of lend themselves more to cloud-based assets versus on-prem assets?
I think we see a lot of, hey, is information publicly exposed? It's a layup, right? It's like low-hanging fruit that attackers can go after.
Right.
So we naturally, incorporated that into our platform. But we definitely see heavily identity-based types of attacks. So not only just compromising the identities that live in the cloud, but again, the identities are any artifacts that can be picked up from the on-prem environment. So if you think about this, right? If you have cloud admins, they have certain API keys or certain access that could potentially be extracted from their machines. Well, why not see if your controls on those machines, like your EDR, whichever, can stop an attacker? So we're going to take a look at that and say, well, let's launch an attack. Let's see if those controls not only stop and alert Pentera. If they do, great. That means, okay, we're good. But if for some reason they don't, can the attacker progress the attack now from that asset and then pivot into the cloud?
Gotcha.
And that's just an example of a joint attack surface vector that we would want to hopefully exploit, or hopefully not exploit, right? Hopefully these controls that everyone is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars on, is stopping us.
What a concept.
Right?
Cybersecurity that works.
But like up until now, how could you measure security? Right? You don't want to wait for an actual attack to happen. And that's what we're enabling, and that's what we want. We don't want to wait. We don't want to assume. We want to validate.
Of course, you're assuming that organizations notice the attack when it does happen and not find out about it months or years later, which has been the case many, many times.
Of course.
I mean, our listeners know that I do PCI as my day job, which is pretty much why we have the annual pen test and why we have a pen testing industry, arguably. And penetration testing has evolved even in PCI, and there's more penetration testing, more focused penetration testing, especially at the application layer. You cover all the bases. Does your tool lend itself more to network attacks or web-based or API-based attacks?
Network and web for sure.
Okay.
And infrastructure for sure. You brought up something though that I wanted to address, because you said compliance had driven pen tests for such a long time.
Well, you asked how do we measure security, and the answer traditionally is compliance.
Correct, right, and we've seen that, right?
Yep.
But Pentera actually issued a state of penetration testing report. We do it every year, just to see where everyone falls, where everyone stacks up, right? And one of those data points that we actually pulled out was that the big driver for penetration testing now is not so much compliance, but the board of directors and upper management executives, they want to know if the organization's ready. And that's actually, in my opinion, I think that's good. I think that's a good sign, because we're not just checking a box. We actually are trying to be proactive with our approach to security. And that's always great, because the attackers are proactive. They're working with each other. I think it's good that we're trying to step up our game as security practitioners.
Well, for those organizations that have the maturity, there's nothing like the live fire test. How well do we hold up against actual attacks? And there is no substitute for that.
There is none, and it's can be very telling when all of a sudden you have EDR you thought was 100% rolled out and it's not, or you have what you think is a SOC that's responding at a certain SLA, and maybe they are, but they're not including all the details. And those details of the evidence-based step-by-step attack is what we're trying to provide. We provide this to our customers so they can cross-reference and say, okay, well, did we get the whole story, right? And it's okay if you don't, because nothing is perfect. But as long as you're taking steps in the right direction, I think that's what it's all about.
Do your customers, clients tend to be more the end user, as it were, or how much are you working with third-party providers that are hosting a bunch of organizations? And there's always that, especially in PCI, there's that gray area of who's responsible for the pen testing.
Yeah, no, we're seeing a lot. All of our customers have a vested interest in taking this on themselves now.
Good.
And like I mentioned, we've been here. I've been at Pentera for about 3.5 years.
Okay.
I've just seen it grow more and more and more. It's reflective of what we're seeing in the survey, for example, that I mentioned, that customers in the boards, they want to know themselves. And I think they want to do it more often than what they were. And they want to potentially get a bigger bang for their buck, right?
Sure.
In regard to, if I'm spending, X amount for just one time a year, I can spend X amount and do it once a month with Pentera.
Right. Yeah, and there's certainly something to be said for that increased sort of continuous awareness of what could be going wrong and what might be happening.
Yeah.
And there's also nothing like, especially when you're outsourcing MSSP providers response, it's good to know that they're on the ball.
Yeah.
I wish there was more of that personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think with global organizations too, they need to establish a baseline. And, if you have testing that's happening in the Americas and testing that's happening in Europe and testing that's happening in Asia, how do you know what is that baseline? I mean, it's not, right? Unless you have a team that's flying around. And to be fair, we've had customers who actually, we call it the James Bond model, right? It was taking Pentera, and they will get on a plane and they use Pentera as the baseline to actually establish that baseline and run the tests so they can say, okay, now we have an apples to apples comparison across the board.
How does Pentera Cloud get deployed, or is it something you log into, or is it something you deploy into your environment?
Pentera is something that you deploy in your environment. Okay. So it is software that sits on top of hardware, or it could be, in your cloud, could be deployed as a VM or an EC2 instance.
Okay.
And it's completely agentless, and that's a big game changer because that really helps with time to value, where you don't have to deploy or manage agents. You are now taking Pentera, installing it, pointing it at the different ranges you want to go, and you are off to the races. And we offer, if anyone out there who is like, no way, bring us in, right? We do a proof of concept, proof of value in a day. Just due to the automation, it's a very light lift, and it's a fun day. You're in the game. It's a fun way. It's a fun part of security.
I'm retired. I hung up my pen testing hat a few years ago, moved on to other things, but I'm definitely still immersed in it.
Yeah.
Our time is winding down. Any other final thoughts or messages you want to convey to our audience?
I think there's nothing more that I could say than think and behave like the attacker, because you're only going to get a true understanding of risk when you launch real life exploits. And we want to do that continuously. We don't want to assume, we want to validate. And if any of this has intrigued you, we're more than happy to have a conversation with you.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so
today,
much.
Jay. I hope you have a great show this
Likewise.
week. The weather couldn't be better, and it's supposed to get better every day.
I hope so.
If anybody wants to find out more about Pentera, you can visit our website, securityweekly.com/Pentera, RSAC. Jay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great show. Welcome back to RSA Conference 2024. I'm Jeff Mann, co-host of Paul's Security Weekly, and we are broadcasting live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West here in beautiful, sunny, and warm today, San Francisco. It's Wednesday. It's the third day of RSA. It's the late afternoon, and we're all getting a little bit punchy. So we're going to have a fun conversation now. With me is Jason Keirstead. He's VP of Collective Threat Defense at a company called Cyware. Jason, welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here today.
Hey, first, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into cybersecurity.
So my background goes way back to about 22 years ago. I started with a startup called Q1 Labs. We built, at the time, it was actually what's nowadays called NDR, but back then it was like the NBAD space.
Okay.
We very quickly pivoted to the SIM space and built a product called QRadar. We were acquired by IBM in 2011. I stayed with the company for a long time, and decided to try some new things a few years ago, and found my way to Cyware. So a long history in cybersecurity technology. I'm starting on the engineering side, and then basically building my way through working with a lot of customers and a lot of stuff in the threat intelligence and standards space. So
Okay.
in addition to my day job at Cyware, I sit on the board of directors of Oasis Open, which is a nonprofit body that stewards a lot of cybersecurity standards like Styx Taxi, Cacao, OpenC2. I also participate in First.org Standards Committee. I've done a lot of things with the MITRE Center for Threat and Foreign Defense in the past. So I do a lot of stuff in open source, open standards, open security.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very passionate about this idea of collective defense and working together in the industry a lot more than we do today. I think that one of the biggest challenges in cybersecurity is that we just don't work enough together. We reinvent too many wheels. I could kind of talk all day about why I think that is, but there's reasons for it that have to do with just the culture of cybersecurity and secrecy. People hesitate to share and stuff, but what drove me to Cyware was the mission of the company to enable collective defense and try to break down those barriers and bring technology to the fore to help people share more effectively, help people collaborate more effectively.
So, I mean, you're sort of implying it with what you're saying in terms of the lack of collaboration, but give us a short working definition of what you mean when you say collective defense.
Sure. So collective defense it starts with sharing and operationalizing threat intelligence, right?
Okay.
Being able to, do the basic operations that people do in sharing bodies like ISACs and ISAOs, and secret squirrel clubs and others that shares threat information. But collective defense is the next level beyond just sharing threat intel. It's actually collaborating in real time around things like detection rules, around things like incident response playbooks, process of procedure, things like, compliance and policy remediation. So when zero-day threat occurs and everybody is scrambling, trying to respond to the latest incident, instead of doing it in silos, in SOCs all over the industry, collaborating with your peers on that zero-day threat analysis so that you don't have 10 different SOC teams all trying to build the same detection rule for the same threat actor.
Right.
Why not build it together in a trust community? Because you'll save so much time, money, and effort doing it that way.
Okay.
Our adversaries are collaborating a lot better than we are, and that's what we at Cyware are trying to help enable.
I mean, I'm familiar with the ISACs of the world. I have a friend that started one of the first ones back, gosh, I don't know, 30 years ago maybe. And I know they've always been challenged with, just within an industry sharing anything, because of the fear of losing that competitive edge, and they're all competitors and they're not supposed to like each other anyway.
Yes.
How does that look? How do you approach that sort of fear and reticence in a different way and accomplish things in terms of not just coordinated sharing of our shorts were down, but hey, all of our shorts are down. How are we gonna fix this problem?
Exactly. And I think that and to your point, it has been a challenge, right? People have been hesitant to share and even more hesitant to collaborate, right? And it took a long time to get us to the comfort level of, okay, I'm comfortable sharing these IP addresses in my trust group.
Right.
We've got to then take those same learnings about, yes, it took us a lot to get over that hump, but guess what? The whole world didn't catch on fire when we started sharing this stuff. And actually it was a big force multiplier. We need to get to that same level for things like detections, for things like incident response, because again, we, for the most part, right, we are all fighting the same adversaries. Now, when I say that, sometimes I get a little pushback, oh, I'm dealing with nation state APTs. This is a highly sophisticated actor. They're targeting my organization. That is true, right? There's always going to be those targeted adversaries. But, I like to think, I drive a lot of my thinking by the 80-20 rule, right? Like, and sometimes we let perfect be the enemy of the good in cybersecurity. If we can tackle 80% of the commodity threats, things like ransomware, phishing attacks, drive-by downloads, if we can tackle that side of the problem so we can refocus our efforts on these more sophisticated threats, right? Think about how much better we would all be as an industry.
Sure. At the risk of throwing a curveball to you, do you have an opinion, very brief opinion, on how legislation and proposed legislation is going to help or hinder what you want to see happening?
So I'm a big fan of some of the new legislation and regulatory action that's been coming out, both here in the United States as well as in other parts of the world. I think that, some of the stuff that's been happening over the past 18, 24 months, I'm not going to name any names or any specific instances, but we all know what's been happening lately.
Right. We don't talk about Bruno.
Yeah. So that's definitely raised the profile of the risk to, both the country and the economy. And so it's great that we're now seeing that regulatory action come into play. I'm very encouraged by some of the stuff that's going on. Organizations like CISA encouraging more sharing inside of the U.S. federal agencies. So we're hoping to see a lot of great outcomes come over that over the next 18, 24 months. So I'm optimistic about it.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about Cyware. So where does Cyware come in, and what does Cyware bring to the table to help all this happen?
Yeah, so at Cyware, we focus on two primary vectors. So we've been talking a lot about collaboration. So we have a purpose-built cybersecurity collaboration platform that powers over 85% of the National Council of ISACs. We also, have customers all over the world that leverage that platform to share and collaborate on collective defense. So it's not just typical threat intelligence indicators, compromise and things like that, but we actually let people share detection rules, collaborate on incident response and things like that. So Cyware Collaborate's kind of a one-stop shop for an ISAC or ISAO or any community who wants to share information to get up and running really quickly. The other really exciting thing that we do is we work in this cyber fusion space. So we bring in threat intelligence and apply orchestration and automation of that intelligence and help you up-level your incident response by, essentially being able to prioritize the highest risk incidents first, apply that automation wherever it makes sense and is possible to pull the enrichments in. And, essentially what we're trying to do is bridge together all the things that were formerly siloed pieces of information, right? And we do that a number of different ways. We're a big supporter of open standards, things like Sticks and Taxi, because they help enable this interoperability and pulling all that information together. Everything in Cyware is built around those data models. That really helps us because Sticks is a natural graph of intelligence, so it helps us reason about the data. So we bring all the data in from these different places, model it as Sticks, helps us create those insights and then apply it to the incident response process.
Okay. So you're collecting a lot of data. And there's this buzz around RSA this week about evolving technologies that consume that data and do amazing or scary things. Tell me something real about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're alluding to AI and some of the buzz around AI that's going on.
Quite
in the
possibly,
past
Mike,
days.
but I refuse to say it.
So I think so there's both a very positive and strong use case for AI in cybersecurity, and there are definitely some things to be skeptical of, right? So on the positive outcome side, how are we seeing AI be leveraged to be very effective? One of the most powerful ways that we've seen is helping the incident responder and the threat hunter be able to orchestrate things more effectively. So a great use case that we're running through with our clients in our quarterback product, which we launched a couple of last week, which is our AI subsystem, is the ability to go in and say, hey, I have these 10 million compromised credentials that are coming in from this threat feed. Quarterback, please tell me whether or not there are any accounts in my Okta instance that match any of these compromised credentials. And then, having that be able to go and do that and automatically tell you, I have found 5 accounts that match that data set. Okay, I want you to reset all those people's passwords. Done. I have gone and sent and reset those people's passwords. Perfect. I now want to add an updated create a ticket in ServiceNow that says that we go and remediate these 5 accounts. Add a note to follow up on this next week, and then send that email off to John Smith. So being able to do that in plain English within a matter of seconds, and not having to understand, maybe I've never used Okta before because I just switched to it from a different IDP. All of that's now abstracted away from you. You don't have to worry about all those different nuances about how to do that and all the different tools, because the AI is really great at doing that for you. Now, that only works if your AI is able to have all those integrations integrated out of the box. And thankfully, the way that we've built our quarterback system, we're able to leverage all 400 plus of our integrations that are part of our SOAR product from day zero, which is one of our kind of unique differentiators. So now to pivot back to, what do we have to be concerned about with AI? One of the things that I am challenged with here on the floor of RSA is, so I work a lot in the standards interoperability space, as we were saying, and I kind of see an impending problem developing where every single major vendor in cybersecurity is building their own AI system, right?
Or at least they claim to be.
And
and they've been doing it magically for the last 7 years.
Right.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
And don't get me wrong. So I just gave a great use case for AI, and there are there's more, things like helping accelerate reporting, helping summarize threat reports. But the challenge is if everybody builds their own AI and those AIs are not able to interoperate and talk to each other and exchange information effectively, we are once again recreating this big interoperability problem, which is the same problem we had with SIMs, the same problem we then recreated again with EDRs, and we're on the path to do it again with AI. So, one of the things I've been talking a lot about the past couple of days to people in the hallways and at a couple of events is I'm trying to advocate for vendors to come together to try to develop systems and mechanisms so that these AIs can talk to each other. So that you can go and talk to an AI from major vendor A, ask it a question, and it knows that vendor B owns some of that information, and it can go and talk to the other AI and pull that information back.
I think I can think of maybe a half dozen science fiction movies where they're going to start talking to themselves anyway.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not.
Yes.
But we have a few moments left. Any, parting words of wisdom, anything you want to, really leave our audience with to think about, to ponder?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I could wave a magic wand and have anything change in the cybersecurity industry, it would be that everybody collaborates and shares a lot more information and kind of, gets over the fear bubble about, being worried about sharing and collaborating too much, right? I think, it has to do with the background of the industry and the culture and things like the CIA triad and, people thinking that confidentiality applies to everything. I could talk about this at length, but I think that,
I've been talking about it for 40 years.
Yeah. But again, like our adversaries don't worry about any of this stuff. They don't have legal teams to concern themselves about, sharing their latest techniques. So we have to figure out how to do that to keep up with the pace of innovation. So
great. Well, Jason, thanks for taking the time to sit down with us today and talking about the reality of things versus the not so reality of things. You guys want to learn more about Cyware and what they're doing, especially this idea of collective threat defense, go to securityweekly.com/Cyware. That's CYWARERSAC. That's going to wrap us for now. Thanks a lot, Jason.
Thanks, Jeff.
We're back at RSA 2024. We're in Moscow West, Broadcast Alley. I'm Jeff Mann, co-host of Paul Security Weekly, trying to push through the barrier of it being the third day here at RSA. But I'm here right now, excited to talk to Tony Origema. He's the Chief Revenue Officer for a company called Anomaly. Tony, welcome.
Thanks, Jeff.
To Broadcast Alley.
Appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the business of cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in cyber for about 20 years now. So I spent a bulk of my career at IBM Security is part of the group that built that division and took it out. And of course, IBM is well known for QRadar and Guardium, but a host of other security solutions. So cut my teeth in a really wide swath of different technologies, and now obviously moved on and focused around security operations space.
And you work for this company called Anomaly.
Anomaly, yeah. So
a play on words, I guess.
Yeah, play on words, pun intended, I guess. Yeah. Let me tell you a little bit about Anomaly. So Anomaly's been around for a while. A lot of people know Anomaly. We're a Silicon Valley company. We're based down here in Redwood City, so we're local. And we have what we call an AI-powered security operations platform. Okay. It's a proprietary big data engine. And what we try to do is solve for a lot of the limitations of legacy security operations tools around visibility, speed, performance, and try to simplify a lot of what has gotten concocted together around SIM, XDR, MDR, ETL, TIP, and all of these different things. And we take an approach to make this very naturalistic and very simple, but also open up a much wider set of telemetry that people can use to secure themselves.
So you're that machine in Willy Wonka where everything goes into it and now comes a nice delectable piece of
absolutely.
That can be easily consumed.
Yeah, so I talk about this a lot with customers. So a lot of people know Anomaly from our history and intelligence, and we still focus a lot on intelligence, because if you think about what it is, detecting a threat is something that is a byproduct of a rule that you've set. It doesn't necessarily tell you whether or not that's a valid threat or not. So what we've always brought to the table is intelligence to confirm whether or not that's a threat and what's the priority level of that threat. And the way that we've done that is we've consumed a massive amount of data, understood the context of that data in context of who you are, what your business is, what you're doing, and what is the telemetry around it to say, yeah, that actually is a threat. So yeah, there's a little bit of Willy Wonka magic that happens in there.
Well, and I have a DoD background going back many years, let's say, where the idea of anomaly detection had to do with my earliest memories of it is detecting things that might be flying towards you from over the horizon where you're not seeing it until too late. Yeah. So, but even migrating into the tech world, into the internet world, into now what we call cyber, it was all about learning what's normal so that you're more likely to detect the not normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anomaly.
Yeah.
So I get it on the concept.
Yeah.
So how has Anomaly as a company changed over the last 10 years? How have you evolved given the changing world that we're in?
Yeah, I think it's always interesting because our intent was always around big data. How do you consume a large amount of data, make sense of it, and act on the things that are really pertinent to you? And I love that analysis. Like, let's look over the horizon, what's out there, right? And so if you're sitting on passive threat detection rules and things like that, you're always waiting for something to hit you. Right. And the whole idea of Anomaly is let's look out at intelligence. And what is intelligence? It's telling you about what's actually happening out in the environment. Threat actors, threat vectors, different techniques that are being used, and then warning you ahead of time these things, and it can affect you because of who you are and what you're doing and the tools that you're using. Right. That's what we do. We focus that around specifically threat intelligence. But what we were solving for along the way was really a big data problem. how do you consume that kind of data? And what customers were continually coming to us saying, well, can I give you telemetry that I can't get my existing tools to understand, or I can't get my tools to scale to, because it's just really big and gnarly. And what we realized was we were really solving for something that was bigger out there, which is people aren't getting to the visibility that they need. The tools that they're using aren't able to understand that data. And what we've built out is something that can scale to petabytes of data, really massive. And so people are bringing us in to solve for those deep threat hunting tools, but also in some cases completely displace their security operations. It's just a simpler way to go about it.
Yeah, it's not like we've made this problem any easier over time by synthesizing and drilling down and simplifying the data that's out there. I mean, it's more and more and more and more every day. And what I'm hearing you say is all the companies go out and buy all the fancy products to produce all this data, and then what? And we've certainly heard of breaches over the years where the companies might have had the detection tool in place and it might have been screaming, there's something happening. But there was so much noise, they didn't notice that little blinky light or the screaming or the siren.
Absolutely. I mean, there's multiple levels to that challenge. I mean, one of it is just the proliferation of tools, and we all know this. Love RSA, I love this industry, but you go down to the floor, how do you figure out how are you going to apply all these tools? And when you bring in 75 plus tools into an enterprise environment, there's no way you can run those tools effectively. So you have flashing lights going on all the time. How do you know you got your eyeballs in the right one? And there's certainly been a lot of attempts through SOAR platforms and different integration platforms to try to automate that, but that problem still persists, right? And that's a lot of what we focus on. I love the word you use, simplify. We want to make this really simple. And the way that we invite customers in to engage with it is engage with it in natural language. Yes, it's AI, but it's really about how does you as a human being saying, this is the business that I'm in. How am I exposed by risks out in the environment based on what I do and where my telemetry is coming in, whether that's in-house, through the cloud, and everywhere. And so that simplification is what we're trying to do. And I get asked that question all the time, and came up actually twice today, is how do I leverage you guys to just give me an overview of what's happening across my environment? And that's a great use case for how people use us.
Yeah, I had this thought yesterday, and I'm surprised some PR marketing person hasn't figured it out yet, but some sort of concept of how do you eat the cyber elephant, one cyber bite at a time or something like that, or more, maybe 1 petabyte at a time. Let's have a little bit of fun with it. Out of curiosity, are you taking any and all data these days, or are you more focused on collectively what would be the output of security products?
So we can work with any type of data. So obviously we've put our laser focus on security telemetry, but oftentimes the use cases that we end up solving are, most people will call it fusion. Right. Okay. So now I want to look at OT data. I want to look at IT data. I want to look at fraud. I want to look at all these different elements. And that's the beauty of what we built. It's a big data engine. I think it's one of the fastest and scalable engines out there. But we've been working on out of the box use cases that are completely outside of not even just security and IT, but research. And how do you use that engine to look at what I have people on the lines of business doing, and can I leverage this technology? So it's really been a fun thing to do with customers.
Are you able to sort of tailor searches to specific targets or specific potential targets or specific data sets that clients are more worried about protecting than maybe another?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the beauties of what our Copilot does. So we have Anomaly Copilot, which is our AI engine. The unique part about that is it's working off of our intelligence repository. So again, that history and what people know Anomaly well is we have the world's largest repository of intelligence. And so when you're working in our Copilot, it is working off that intelligence repository. What that does is, one, it makes it safe. It makes it a lot higher fidelity, but also it's closed repository, so it doesn't hallucinate, and it gives you really high fidelity answers. But what we're able to do then is allow you to interact with it in a very naturalistic way. And if you give us data models, then you can start to focus in on, I want to know about these specific things. So it's a reasoning engine around that technology and then around that telemetry. So so you can ask it very simple things about, hey, what's MoveIt? What's LockBit? What do I need to worry about there? Am I affected? There's really interesting things that you can apply there.
Out of curiosity, and I hope this is not a curveball question, but I have heard several discussions throughout the week and throughout the previous year or so of some of the concerns about some of these emerging technologies and emerging capabilities, let's say, where this data set that you're collecting, is it a particular client's data set, or is it all the data set? And how are you addressing the concerns of some that are concerned about how you're consuming my data and possibly sharing it with a competitor or things like that?
So I think first of all, you've got to look at that data inside of a safe container. So in our case, we're cloud-based. We work at AWS. Those are in secure containers, and we work inside of that environment. Number two, we don't pull anything into our engines on the back end, right? Well, we will look at the data. We don't ingest any of that data, and that is a problem that certain engines have incurred here because they're leaching data on the back end and they're exposing it, right? Which is a real no. You should never be doing that. And we answer that question all the time from customers and prospects to say, well, what happens to my data? If I point it to you, do I have to give it to you? No, just point it at us. You put it in the safest place you want it. We will never pull or extract anything from you. From it and keep it. And that's what everybody should
reviewing it, characterizing it, capturing data points about it, metadata, to use a data term, metadata.
Metadata, absolutely.
Characteristics.
Trends, right?
So in some sense, it's anonymized kind of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I would be remiss for our audience. They know that I work in the PCI field, and PCI has been around for 20 years now and just rolled out version 4. And one of the changes that are happening in version 4 that is requiring, and of course, these are all entities, organizations that deal somehow with payment card security. So the protection of the credit card number, the debit card number, and anything associated with that. One of the requirements in terms of logging and monitoring is the reviewing of the logs, the reviewing of the data. And PCI has been trying for probably 15 years to move organizations to a more continuous monitoring type of concept. But in version 4, they're saying, okay, you get a grace period. So it's a new rule, will be enforced next April, but definitely requires the automated review of data. You have clients that kind of play in that space. Are you ready to help them with that?
Yeah, well, we certainly have a lot of financial services, a lot of retail clients that PCI is, one of their top 3 main concerns. And you're right. I mean, whether it's regulatory, government requirements of continuous monitoring, having a multi-year history on file so we can go back and look at it. These are all problems. When I go back to talking about the visibility challenge, that's the real visibility challenge. The tools that they're sitting on aren't capable of doing that. It's very expensive in some cases to do that. And that's where we think we're helping out a lot, is they're looking to us and saying, okay, this is a tool that I can actually get the speed, scale, and performance I need to actually keep that stuff running on a continuous loop and go back. So we can go back 7+ years without any challenge and slow down in the performance. So it helps that challenge a lot.
Cool. We've only got a few minutes left. Sort of open floor. What's the message that you're really trying to get to the RSA community today and our audience at large?
Yeah. So I think for us, it's all about how do we help businesses protect what they do and propel businesses forward. What we're trying to do is liberate people from all of these different siloed security operations tools that they've used, right? And we have created kind of a logjam here, a lot of different things, right? So get away from the tools. Look at what you're trying to do in your business. What are you trying to protect from? Based on your business, what's your highest level of risk? Get the visibility that you need. Bring all of that data to one place where you can actually look all of it. Be current. The threats that are impacting you now are likely have been there for 6 months or longer in a lot of cases. If you're not looking at that history in continuous basis, you're missing things. So you're not going to detect things that are actually present inside of your environment. So look for tools that can give you that full visibility. Look for tools that unlock you out of proprietary query language and building, right? The thing about AI is everybody's out here talking about it. it's a beautiful thing if you can leverage it to go from human to machine language. And that's part of what we do. Talk to it. It will create that query language for you. You can augment it from there. But we can help bring on analysts, give them all that visibility, but they could be 2 days out of school and they could be operating our platform doing intense querying just simply by human interface with our. So I would encourage everybody, look at what you're trying to do before you're looking for the next tool.
But what I like to call the purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing?
Always got to start with the why.
Yeah. Well, great. Appreciate your time today. Appreciate learning a little bit more about Anomaly. For those of us listening, if you want to find out more, go to securityweekly.com/anomaly. That's with an I and then RSAC. We want to thank you. We'll be back in a few minutes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.